Hello everyone, I guess Jen, hopefully you're having a good Tuesday. Back again a day late this week as the Fanatics / what used to be PWCC website had a malfunction on Sunday night, so they had to run it back a day, allow everything to get a couple more bids and run out the process. If you've been around a while, this happened back in the day, probably once or twice a year, even when it was PWCC, seemingly still happening when it's Fanatics. Obviously not something I'm a fan of, but I did get a win in there, so I was excited generally with the auction, and hopefully you're excited to get into it. I know I am. Without further ado, let's get into it. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoy these videos, but with that said, let's hop over there. So hopping on over here to get into this weekly, we have a $162 watermark for this week. We start with a 1950 Yair Americana Balas football. This is a fun 1950 World Cup release. You have this in the tingles that, at least to me, primarily stand out. I don't think there's a whole lot else going on. And Yair, one of the more notable Brazilian players from the 1950 team, the 1950 team that hosted it and was going on to presumably win it, but then sort of choked in the final, and it's a pretty devastating defeat. So maybe not a World Cup people want to remember, but in terms of notable players from the World Cup, Yair from 1950 set from the Balas football is a pretty cool one there at $162. Seemingly not a crazy price to me, at least, compared to how often I see these sell. Alex Ferguson, quote-unquote rookie from 1971. I'm not familiar too much with the rookies of Alex Ferguson. I remember a different one, so this one I can't speak on, but goes for $180 there with 19 watchers. 1978 Franco Baresi PSA 7. This one sold a little bit cheaper than the last one, but a decent bit more than the one before that, so it's somewhere in between. This does have the IPL sticker as well. Moving on up, we have the Lukaku PSA 10 Gold. This one I thought got a pretty decent premium for being a 10 grade. Typically that's the case, but sometimes with these types of players and the niche cards, you wonder if they're going to get the premium. I think this one did, because I've seen, raw Lukakus that are similar go for pretty low numbers, I feel. Lionel Messi Topps Finest Orange. This goes for $198, a PSA 8. We then have a 2014 Harry Kane PSA 9 for about $200 there. Above that, a second year R9 that goes for $198, and a PSA 8. We also have a Bergman with an on-card signature from 66, so this is a second year, but looks like the rookie that goes for $204. Then you have a Mo Salah Color Blast for $210 next to that. Above that, a few stickers in this row. We have the Maldini PSA 7 for $210. We have the 2010 Messi Autografo, the sort of facsimile auto that we see go quite a bit. This goes for $216. A 63 Dino Zoff rookie Velita back PSA 5, excellent. Pop 104 higher, decided to look this one up because it didn't seem like a crazy price, but it's also one you don't see too often. When we compare backwards, last PSA 3 did 103, a PSA 4 did 174, so comparing to the 4 and the 3 prices that we see here, this doesn't seem like too great of a sale, but the last PSA 7 did 372, which isn't even double, and the last PSA 5 did 150, so, depends what you want to look towards, but I would say that that's probably within what you'd expect that to go for. Above that in this row, nothing too crazy. We have a 34 that I'm just going to assume has Miazza. Then we have a 2021 Neymar PSA 9 that goes for $228, a Kaboom there that only has 20 watchers, which kind of surprised me. I know Kaboom generally seems to get a lot of viewers, a lot of eyeballs, but in this case not so much. Could be a Neymar thing, could be 2021, could be PSA 9. You could chalk that up to a lot of different reasons. Then we have a 2022 Holland Red Flood here, PSA 10. I always loved the look of the Red Floods, but Obsidian in general sort of a hard set because all the parallels kind of look similar. None of them really stand out, and the consistent numbering, I don't know if that really even exists. So to me, it's just a little tricky, but I do think that in terms of look and aesthetics, a PSA 10 Erling Haaland 2022 out of 10, Red Flood going for $230 doesn't sound crazy. But at the same time, it's not something I'm actively hunting, so I guess my opinion doesn't matter all too much, but I was pretty impressed to see 33 watchers. It's a decent amount for a parallel that I wasn't sure really garnered all that much attention. Above that, Cole Palmer, rookie, PSA 10 of an out of 25 from 2021 Finest, goes for $240. We have another Messi facsimile from 2010 right there, and a PSA 10 that goes for $240. A PSA 5 Vidal Tinghals from 1950. This goes for $252. PSA 5 super high grade on that set. 14 watchers though, so presumably not all too relevant of a player, but at the same time, the set in general is highly collectible, at least in terms of vintage. 2004 PSA 8 Messi. This is the non-foil that went for $288. Not a crazy price, but not a terrible price, I guess. So this is probably the least preferred, I would say, out of any of the Messi rookies, as you can see by the watchers as well, only at 17. Next to that, we have Pedri with 19 watchers at $300 there for the out of 25 Topps Chrome Auto. PSA 2 record. This is a really low price. Now, this does have some staining on the bottom and on the back, but I mean, a PSA 2 record going for 300 compared to anything I've ever seen. Now, if you compare back to pre-boom, probably not as much the case, but these were holding fairly well and have seemingly sort of fallen off a cliff in general. You know, even particular grades. I think we'll see a 9 later that does a low price comparatively. Above that, we have a Jared Muller PSA 10. These are fairly easy to grade. 10's probably hard to get, but these do get 8s and 9s decently often. As you can see, Pop 1 of 4 goes for 300. Don't have a whole lot else to add in terms of the niche 80s to 90s stars, as I'm not all too familiar. So hate to see it, but going on to page 3 now. Getting just a little bit higher here, we have, starting off, an Erling Haaland PSA 10 Sapphire that went for 312. Those have been going for as low as 200, 250 lately, so that's a little bit of a come up. We've seen those steadily go from 800 to near about 200s at times, so that one's up a little bit. We have a green optic Jadon Sancho out of 5, goes for 312 there from the 2018 optic set. This says 2019, that is not correct, but no matter the case. Look this one up, and the last one was a BGS 9.5 that went for 282, so I guess, you know, a BGS 9 doing 312 with a misleading title probably is not all too shabby. Now, this was a year ago. You know, Jadon Sancho definitely fell off a cliff when you talk about this card in particular, but just all of his cards at one point in time. Like many prospects, he was all the rage. Now he's not. Back in the day, 2022 January, went for 2K here, and I don't even think that was close to the peak of Jadon Sancho. So that gives you some perspective on that. Down a good bit, but up just a little bit from the last sale. Someone that's also struggling, I would say, and you know, maybe not as deservedly, is a 2016 Kylian Mbappe PSA 9 rookie here that goes for 324, which sort of caught my eye because when we go and look, that's down a good bit. I just closed it out. All right, let's try again. There we go. So this PSA 9, Pop 564, which was the first thing that I looked at because just naturally my eye got drawn towards. It's not terribly high. Like when we talk about Pops, I mean, the Maradona Calcitorian Vintage has, I guess in totality, it's like a Pop 2, 3, probably closer to 300, 400 at this point. I guess this is only one grade, so if we look in general, what's the Pop on this? 1400 for PSA, 350 for Beckett, but under 2K in total, which, you know, when you're talking about Mbappe stuff, I mean, he's got to have thousands upon thousands of 2017, 2018 numbered. And so this is rarer than that. Now, of course, it is a sticker. It's not a premium release. It's not a card. I get all that stuff. But when we look at an all-time price graph here, down quite a bit from the booming days, of course, but still not really holding steady at any point. I was someone that, you know, I had bought one of these during the boom and had sold it probably around here. And at that point, I was like, well, I'll buy an Mbappe whenever they get cheaper. And it went down to about 1,000 pretty quickly. And I was like, well, maybe I'll wait until it's cheaper. And then it went down to 500. And I was like, maybe I'll wait till it's cheaper. And now we're at 314. So I guess 330 when you combine whatever else sold last night. But man, it has just been struggling. Last year, down 40%. Last 2 years, down 60%. And to be fair, you know, it is a sticker in Modern where stickers basically don't matter to people. But to me, as a casual, as just a chill guy looking to maybe buy an Mbappe, but I don't really want to go balls deep and go hunt, you know, out of 10s that are worth 10, 20 grand. If I just wanted one, I think this would be the one. And I don't think 330 is crazy. At the same time, obviously not really doing the most with Real Madrid at the moment. They're struggling a little. On top of that, you know, Mbappe obviously had a lot of prospect hype built into him, but at the same time, he's probably going to go down as one of, if not the best World Cup performer ever, which I think matters. People are so quick to forget, but had things fallen another way, he very easily could have had 2 World Cups at this point, which would have just been crazy. But instead, he has one, and he went toe-to-toe with Messi for another, but people don't really care, at least, for the time being. So then we have a 2016 Select Cristiano Ronaldo field level tie-dye that went for 324 and a PSA 8. Obviously not the best grade, Pop 1 of 1, 8 higher, but compared to field levels in general that I see go, I feel like that's a decent price. You'll see PSA 9s of, you know, sort of semi-stars or less notable stars that go for anywhere from 50 to 150 at times. So 324 for Ronaldo doesn't strike me as all too high. Camavinga 5 out of 5 Black Stadium Club Chrome rookie goes for 324 there. We also have a Florian Wirtz green out of 99 and a 10 go for 324 also. Above that, a 73 Eusebio, pretty nice colors there, later career, but goes for 336, Pop 1 of 3, none higher. We also have another PSA 9 Mbappe, so that was the other part of the weighting we saw in the graph prior. Then we have a Jadon Sancho out of 10 Red Wave PSA 9, goes for $336. Thought that was interesting. I mean, just compared to the green optic, I know green probably isn't people's favorite, but personally I take the green optic, I think. Obviously half the pop, and in addition you have the England kit instead of the Dortmund kit, which presumably over time, if you believe in them, the England kit would matter, but obviously that depends on if you believe them. If you don't. Moving on up, we have a 78 crack Maradona that goes for $360. There will be another PSA 1 that did a really good price last night, but that's also an eye appeal sticker. So this one goes on the lower end of the range. Typically these are 300 to 500. They've been lower at times, but I'd say generally 300 to 500 is about what you'd expect. Then we have a couple Erling Haalands, a Kaboom, and a Leaf Auto here, goes for 372 and 360. This Alcantara, I'm not exactly sure, went for 372. Feels pretty strong to me, but maybe there's something here I'm missing just generally with the sort of inaction Spanish issues. They don't go for a crazy price, especially in low grades like this. So I'm a little confused by this number, but maybe there's something I'm missing. If there is, feel free to let me know. PSA 9 Kaboom Mbappe from 2021 goes for $444. We have a Lionel Messi Color Blast that goes for $456 and a PSA 9. Above that, a Telmo Zara PSA 4 rookie that goes for $468. This is one that we have seen in a 3 do a decent number lately. Now we see in a 4. There have been a lot of 1s and 2s, but generally you don't see this high of a grade, as you can see by the pop report beneath it. We have a 58 Titularis team photo, pop 1 of 2, none higher, goes for nearly $500. A Vinicius PSA 10 Kaboom that goes for nearly $500 as well. Then we have a 1946 Nanina Miazza PSA 8 that goes for $504. Just a fun late set for him, not a notable one, but Naninas in general are fairly collectible. As you can see here, 46 Nanina Zellinger that went for $516. I think it might be pronounced Zengele. I'm pretty sure that's what I remember, but nonetheless, he went for $516 on PSA 7. I looked that one up, but I'm not sure if it's still up there. No, it's not. So I looked that up last night just out of curiosity. It was the highest selling one out of any of these Naninas for this player, so it does get the all-time high price there at $516, just a little over a PSA 6 that had recently sold. Next to that, in between the two, we have a Kaboom Vinicius that goes for $504. And then finally, on the top of page 2, we have a 1985 Eric Cantona PSA 4 rookie that goes for $552 with the eye appeal designation. And that, at least to me, I guess the eye appeal designation sort of makes a little bit more sense on the pricing, because it seemed like a strong price in the sense that a PSA 5 recently did $630, and this does $552, just one grade lower. If you go back even further, PSA 5 in the past sold for $468, and that obviously is lower than the price that we have here for a one grade lower copy. Even a PSA 5, I mean, you can go further back if you want. This seems like a generally good sale compared to some of the sales of late. Also considering a lot of these have sold this year, at least compared to last year. I think there have been like 8 or 9 this year, and last year there was only a couple. So holding up despite the issues coming out, but this has always been one that isn't all that easy to find. Mid-80s foot is not going to be. And then we end out the row with a Lamine Yamal PSA 10 and a Roberto Carlos PSA 8 rookie from 93. Took a peek at that, of course, and we have beneath that in PSA 8, I guess a PSA 7 here for $432. Other PSA 9s here, an example for $2K. If we go further, last PSA 8 sold for $780, so this is down a good bit, I would say, and also down compared to the PSA 9, a fairly low sale there. But that's always been one that I've sort of been skeptical of. When it's hard for Messi and Ronaldo rookies to really keep up at the multiple thousands level, when Roberto Carlos and the likes of that were keeping up at that price point, it just was sort of curious, because I do believe that there's probably less supply, maybe. I mean, it is Brazil compared to, for Ronaldo, I mean, it's Portugal, so you got to kind of manage what the populations are there and how much product's going to be going out. But like, even if supply is close or even reasonably close, you could, then assume that Ronaldo's demand is going to severely outweigh someone like Roberto Carlos, and seemingly that's sort of, playing out. Now, there is a Rivaldo we'll see in a second that sort of goes against that trend. Next row, bottom of page 2, we have a 1958 Titularis here, a team photo, again, PSA 6 that went for $600. I think that was the same one as the one we had seen prior, about the same price as well, which is weird because it's a pop 1 of 3. Then we have a Ronaldo PSA 9 Kaboom next to that for $600. And then we have my win of the night, which I was pretty excited about, was the 1961 Mexico Pentagonal Pele. This is one that we had seen a copy of one of these go last week. The SGC one last week went for $400, and I paid a little bit more on this one. I'll sort of explain my thought process. This is a set for a tournament that occurred in Mexico between Santos, Independiente, and 3 Mexican teams at the time. I think Guadalajara ended up winning. It was sort of a group play style thing going on there, and they had a set release for it, and this is what I would consider the base Pele within the set. There's team pages, and then there's a page of 8 Peles at the end, and so this is from the team page, not the page of 8 Peles at the end. So to me, that meant a little bit more. I also really love the photo and the full name at the bottom. Thought this was really cool. In terms of comps, I could only find one, which was an SGC2 from 2021 that sold for $500. So I did pay higher than an SGC2 from 2021. But personally, it was a Pele that I really enjoy, really wanted, and was willing to go at or around what I thought comps were. And so I was super excited to have been able to land that one. Keeping it moving, we have a 2021 David Beckham PSA 10 for $630. I do wonder with these Kabooms, we've seen a lot of them just keep going, and I find it hard to believe it's different ones because we don't see a lot of them. So I do wonder if these are reruns, but I just don't care to honestly look into it. If you guys feel like they may be getting rerun, take a look, let me know. Always open to hearing what people see going on. We have a red PSA 10 Messi that goes for $630 from 2018 World Cup. We also have a Tiger Stripe Jude PSA 10 for $660. Interesting stuff there. I'd take Messi just between the two if I had to choose. The Rivaldo for $720 up here in a PSA 8. As I said, that one actually corrected and went up a little bit. If we have the comps on that one, as we can see, less sales on this, only 5 in total. And this one had a couple lower sales at $660 and $560 last year and this year. So up a little bit on those. We have a Leyes Arsenio Rico, PSA 1.5 with an MK that goes for $750 there. No comps on that. Tried to look it up. I mean, there was a fully uncut sort of album of them at one point in time, but hard to really take anything out of that. We also have a 1979 Diego Maradona Calciatore PSA 5, the one for $840. Taking a look at this, it's going to be a bit odd in terms of the graph because actually last night there was a higher sale. You can't quite see it over here, but you can see it off to the side. 1,005 on this last sale, $630 and $750 before that. There was another higher sale last night for one with an eye appeal sticker, hence why this is up quite a bit. But even over the last couple of years, this has stayed fairly still, I would say, and generally is doing okay, at least compared to other maybe Maradonas of the same sort. And all time, I mean, doing really well in terms of pre-boom pricing. I mean, back in the day, $130 and now being worth anywhere from, $750 to $1,200. Up quite a bit in a time where other vintage stuff like the 78 Crack isn't doing all that well compared to pre-boom. Meanwhile, this Calciatore is doing really well comparatively. Kylian Mbappe PSA 10 Kaboom for $870. We then have a Buffon 2002 auto. This is a really cool one. So this is the Panini 2002 World Cup set, of which there are autos in it, numbered to 100. I actually have seen ones that are unnumbered. Presumably those are ones that maybe made their way out of printing facilities that probably shouldn't have. I don't know. But this is a numbered 8 out of 100 Buffon that went for a little under 1,000 there at $870. Trying to take a peek at comps, but there were no Buffon comps. Instead, we have an R9 for $5,500, an R9 for $5,100, an R9 for $6,500, and then finally a Totti from 2022 for nearly $700, and a Totti from 2020 for $800. So, I mean, looking at these prices, I don't think it was some super steal because R9s are going for, $5,000, and that's 2002 R9, which is pretty significant, I would say. So you're probably not going to get near there on a Buffon, but at the same time, when someone was paying, $700 for a Totti and $800 in 2020 for a Totti, that tells me at least that this probably wasn't a bad buy. So to me, a really fun one there. If you're a Buffon, Italian, Juve, whatever collector sort of fits this realm, I think it's a cool card, definitely. I'd take it over the others in the row. And then above that, we have a PSA 9 Messi Mega Cracks. This one, the least desirable of the team set, but goes for $870, which is down a little bit compared to some sales we have seen lately for that. A Johan Cruyff Palarex for sub 1,000. Don't see that all too often, especially with a numerical grade. This one, I thought the back was actually pretty decent. Like, I don't think it was a terrible looking one. Now on the front, you do have this sort of paper loss here and also here, so it's not the best, but the colors are pretty rich and the edges and corners aren't terrible. I mean, the centering's not perfect, but what are you going to do? Back actually looks pretty good. Obviously, a decent bit missing there and some staining going on, but generally, I think for $900, that's a really nice Cruyff. I looked at pre-boom pricing just to get an idea whenever this was sort of happening, and there were twos pre-boom that were selling for like $400 to $500. So I do think a 1 at $900 still a good bit up from pre-boom, but it's not crazy. Like, it's less of a multiple than something like this Maradona that's up from pre-boom. And the Cruyff is a fun one. Now, personally, I'm kind of a sicker Verlag guy, so I've been sticking to that one a little bit. One day, I'm sure I'll branch out into the Palarex, but didn't decide to take the plunge last night. 2019 Speckle Refractor Erling Haaland goes for $930 there. We have a PSA 10 Messi Blue for $960, so nice premium over the red. Then we have a Lamine Yamal auto. We've seen this go before, maybe not the same one, but the same card card, at least out of 99 green. This 57 OMB Grinch was a pretty good sale, I would say. The last one, I think, did like 300 to 400. It was low compared to sales in the past. So when this 151 up, I was sort of wondering maybe it'll go even lower. Instead, it goes basically back to what the prior sales had been. So this one was a big jump back up there at 1,020. We have a red BGS 95 Mbappe. Took a peek at that because, I'm just always curious with what these color Mbappes are doing, because personally, to me, this is one of the cards, if not the card I think of when it comes to the boom in soccer's 2018 Prizm Mbappe. And in terms of comps, when you look at these comps, it looks bad because last couple were 1,500 and 2,400. But before then, it was 1,000, 1,200. And if we keep going back, it's going to get really high, don't get me wrong. But over the last, say, year and a half, it's not down crazily. Now, when we look at the subs, this one is a mixed 9.5. If we look, that means there's a 10 and a 9. If we look at this one, this was actually, I think, quad gem, which is 4 9.5s. And then this one was a super strong sale because it has super strong subs. 10, 10, 9.5, 9.5. That's going to get a premium. So, feels light, at least compared to what I remember during the boom. But obviously, Prizm in general from the booming days has come down quite a way. So it is what it is. This Lamine Yamal out of 25 auto goes for 1140 there. Then we have a Jude Bellingham out of 5 from Obsidian that goes for 1,100. Again, sort of what I was mentioning about Obsidian just being an odd set. Basically any other Jude out of 5 would do a pretty good number, especially in a PSA 10. And this is a thick card, so it tends, even harder. But it seemingly doesn't get a massive premium despite being an out of 5 Jude rookie PSA 10. And then we got a full vintage row above that, a 58 Pele 1.5 that goes for 1,200, a PSA 5 Maradona. This is the complement to the low sale that we saw earlier that sort of weighted this higher, near 1,000. And then we have the 66 Calcio Promo Pele and a PSA 8 that goes for 1,200. Look that one up because you don't see it too often. It seemed like a strong price to me, but at the same time, I hadn't seen it. When we go back and look, as you can see here, I guess I'll move it over just a tad. But in terms of prior sales, 264 for a PSA 5, 200 for PSA 2, and 1,800 for PSA 6. So when you add all that up, this sale looks good compared to the 5. It looks bad compared to the 6 for sure. It looks really bad compared to the 6. And compared to the 2, it looks, fair. So I don't know how to weight this. I would say given everything you're seeing here, it seems fair, but at the same time, compared to the 6, it's a super low sale. So that's the everlasting worry with paying super high premiums on super high grades for the time, especially when it's, say, a 6, because if an 8 comes out or a 9 or a 10, you could be absolutely dwarfed, and you might not get that premium that a 6 price would imply, because a 6 at this price, at least, that was only a year ago, sort of implies that a 8 would be $6K, and obviously that didn't happen here. So to be fair, that's probably a bunch of people. There's only 19 watchers. That is probably primarily people just hunting high-grade Peles for the registry. So, they're probably just willing to pay whatever premiums they have to. Beyond that, this is the start of page 1, so a pretty good first page here, I would say, starting at a $1,200 mark. We start with a PSA 10 out of 50 gold refractor Jude from Bundesliga 2020 that goes for 1,200. As you can see again there, the Topps Chrome Bundesliga PSA 10 gold going for more than the out of 5 Obsidian PSA 10. We have a 1/1 Christian Pulisic from the 2018 National Convention auto that goes for 1,200 there. We have a 1958 Pele Aquarella PSA 2 that goes for nearly 1,300. This had been one that for a while was about $1,000 a grade for the Aquarellas and has been dropping a good bit as of late. But I will say that has been a card that's done really well comparatively to a lot of other Peles. A lot of other Peles have sort of reset. Meanwhile, the Aquarella had stayed really strong, probably due to just the widespread notoriety of it. A lot of people see it, they know it looks good. There's a lot of non-soccer people that own this as well, so I think that helps it at times, but could also hurt it at times. Above that, another Pele, as you can see again, one of the most, if not the most common Pele to see on auction in terms of his rookies. Beyond that, we have a 2019 Erling Haaland Gold PSA 10 that went for 1,500. This seemed like a good sale. If I remember by comps, I think it was a strong sale as well, but just generally speaking, the Topps Museum Erling Haaland's and just Topps Museum base in general doesn't get a lot of love, so nearly 1,500 on that's pretty good. Now it is a color match PSA 10, pop 1 of 2. I I think that helps. PSA 10 Campio Messi 2004. This is the green that goes for $1,500, which is the second in command. I think we'll also see the blue in a PSA 9 later that ends up topping the list, but $1,500 is about right on that. This PSA 8 Este, a little low, at least compared to what you see 9s go for. Typically, the 9s are like 4 to 5K, so you'd expect 8s to maybe be 2.5. This one goes for $1,680. Don't see a lot of these sell, primarily because they're one of the, if not the rarest rookie in terms of unstuck versions, but also because PSA has not been grading these, at least as of late. They started grading them recently, but for the previous 3 years, they weren't grading them at all, so they weren't all that much out there in PSA slabs. Here we have a Johan Cruyff 2 going for $1,800. This 2 is around what 2s actually do. I think that the 1s and 2s were very close in price for a good while, and at least in this auction, we saw a difference in 1s and 2s, which seemingly makes sense. Typically there's a pretty good difference there. Now looking at this copy, the front looks a little bit better, doesn't have the paper loss. The back, again, looks about as good, maybe a little more faded, but not the same staining and paper loss that you see on the 1. So I think that's fair that gets a 2, the other gets a 1. Then we have the 66 Tempo Pele here that is not the promo, PSA 9 that goes for $1,860, pop 1 of 3, none higher. Some pretty high prices there on a grading premium Pele. In this row, we get back to some modern items with a Lamine Yamal Kaboom PSA 9. PSA 9 Kaboom for $2,000. I mean, my lord. My lord. Oh my gosh. Okay. Beyond that, 2004 71 bits PSA 5 goes for $2,000. Look that up because we don't look at 5s all too often, or even like the mid grades in general. Over the last 6 months, practically even. Over the last year, more of the same, I guess, down 10%. But if I had to explain why maybe the 5s aren't kicking up and some of the higher grades are, well, one, whenever the Messi ship starts turning in the right direction, usually it's going to start with cards that can do it a bit easier. They don't have the same type of pop, so it's going to be hard to have the 5s move before the higher grades move. You're usually following the higher grades, so this is going to take some more time. But also in terms of comparing it to the Boom, I don't know what's going on here. I mean, obviously it was the peak of all peaks, but if we just talk about, take that out, take this little couple months span out, I mean, really the all-time high on this card was 3,500 to 4,500, so being 2K now isn't all that bad, I would say. Obviously, being down 50% in general sucks. Don't get me wrong, especially if you bought up here. But compared to where soccer has come, I mean, it was 227 back in the day. So it's still up 8, 9x from where it was pre-boom. But it's obviously down from where it was at the absolute peak. But you're not going to be able to be at the all-time peak all the time. That's just impossible. Beyond that, PSA 10 2014 red, yellow, Pulsar, Messi, Ronaldo. Above that, a couple 1-of-1s in this row along with a Pele Titulares. Take your pick between these two. I thought the Dybala went pretty high. I wouldn't have expected that price point. I think I saw I want to say Neymar field level 1-of-1 the same year. I think it went for maybe 4K, 5K, somewhere in there. And, it's always hard to price 1-of-1s, but at the time I thought that was strong. I was like, dang, that's impressive. But this is pretty impressive as well. Now, Juve does have a pretty good collector base, I will say, just generally. So I think that probably helps this as well, being a color match black 1-of-1 from field level. Just, one of the cooler cards I would imagine Dybala has out there, at least in my opinion. And so I can see it doing a good number. I feel like that's definitely a good number, generally speaking. Take your pick between the two. Obviously, Vinny probably being the, more sought-after player for the time being. The watchers would indicate that. I'm not sure with how many 1-of-1s exist in Prism Copa America or for Vinny in general. I would say that that's one of the things that will heavily help Dybala in this situation, where his career 1-of-1s are going to be significantly less than someone like Vinny, so I think it's more of a standout card for him. The Pele Titulares PSA 4, didn't look this one up just because we've seen a lot of them lately, and so I have a general good idea on what the pricing is of it, and I will say that this was a really low sale. I think a 3 recently went for maybe $2,100, so this went for lower than the 3. Now, I think what doesn't help this here is that it doesn't really look like a 4. I mean, when you're talking about centering, this is absolutely horrid. And, even the corners are fairly beat up, I would say, down here, top left. The registration's okay, I'll give it that. The colors are good too, but, just generally speaking, I think when people buy a 4, they probably don't want to look at something that's almost printed off of the sticker, so I think that probably deters people here. But if you're just going off numerical grade, I think that was a good buy relative to what you see other ones go for. Above that, further into the $2,000 range, we have the PSA 9 Campio Messi here for $2,200. Pretty strong prices on these Messis, generally speaking. I think the white sold a bit light, but the green and the blue doing these numbers on auction is fairly impressive. Now, the Campio is a bit more rare, so, that might play somewhat of a factor, but in the past, I haven't seen that play a huge factor in what people are paying. So maybe that's coming around now, or maybe just Messi rookies in general are doing a bit better, which has been at least what I've seen going on. Then we have 2020 auto for Jude out of 50. PSA 10 goes for $2,200. Pretty strong price there. I mean, I do like the picture, don't get me wrong, but for a sticker from Stadium Club Chrome where the gold isn't even all that powerful, I guess to be fair, I don't know it's gold. I mean, it's out of 50. I assume it is, but anywho, 2,300 here on this George Best PSA 6. Took a peek at that, and when we look at the, okay, I guess this is the PSA 9 Messi, just for some perspective here. It's been lingering around the same price, so nothing too crazy going on there. The PSA 6 George Best is about where you'd expect. I mean, PSA 7 before that did 3,300. PSA 2 did 1,400, which is super strong. Of course, you're going to get that sometimes on eBay with buy it now and best offers. Auctions typically aren't going to get you the biggest number. PSA 5 before that, 1,300. PSA 6, 3,400. So there's just some weird sales here. Like this PSA 6 would indicate that this is a huge drop, but that at the same time, you have a 5 here for 1,200. So why is a 6 doing almost 3 times a 5? I don't know. But these have fallen pretty hard throughout the last couple of years. I mean, I could go further back in comps, but if you just want to take a quick peek, 2023, let's do it. PSA 2 here for 2,100. So, I mean, a PSA 2 with an eye appeal, to be fair, was doing 2,100. Now a PSA 6 does that, which generally, a lot of the vintage guys, I love vintage, vintage link down below to the Discord. If you want to check it out, feel free. I don't usually voice my opinion on it because it's probably not a fan favorite or one that people are going to enjoy, but I just personally, as someone that doesn't have a huge affinity for George Best, to me, he's sort of on the edge of guys I would really want to collect, like all-time greats and just stars of the game, which, to be fair, I'm sure, depending on how you want to word it, he is that. But at the same time, he's just a tier below the best of the best, no pun intended. And he also has a lot of these available. We were looking at the Cruyff earlier. Palarex in a 1 went for 900. Like, would I rather have a Palarex in a 2 or a 3 or this George Best? Or maybe, say, the sicker Verlag Cruyff in like a 6 or a 7. Would I rather have this or this George Best? Probably the Cruyff. And I don't know if that's everyone's consensus. It's a little easier with the George Best to be able to, sort of talk about why it should be more valuable, since it's the George Best everyone thinks of, the one true rookie, all that jazz. But I will say, just generally, the tobacco cards typically grade pretty well, and, the middling grade on this is around a 5 or 6, if I remember correctly. So this isn't like a super high grade, despite it seeming that way. All that to say, I think 2,300 is a fair price. I don't think it's ridiculously low, but that's just one man's opinion. So above that, we get into not the top 3 of this week, but close. We have the record Pele in a PSA 9 that goes for 3,400. This one in the past had been around 8 to 9K. So like I was saying earlier, the records are falling pretty nicely. If you're someone that doesn't have them, I guess if you're someone that does, it's not the best. But again, I would say the record, along with the Aquarella and a lot of the other high pop Peles, held on fairly well. I think just because a lot of people had vested interest in them holding on fairly well. I think that could play a factor, but these have dropped a good bit. Personally, I'm always going to prefer him and Garrincha together in that panel version rather than just the Pele, but I could see non-soccer people not seeing it that way. A Jude 1 of 1 goes for 4,080 from 2023 Topps Merlin, a sticker auto as well. And then a BGS 9 Messi goes for 4,300 there, around the price that we typically see for those with 51 watchers. And then the top 3 for this week, we have, again, 3 goats of soccer, R9, Mbappe, and Jim Thorpe, all 3 together. I actually did look up the Jim Thorpe just because I'm interested, but we start with an R9 PSA 9 from 1994 Football. Don't see these in high grade. I was sort of surprised when I saw this pop 1 of 12, 7 graded higher. I knew 10s existed because I had seen pictures at times, but I didn't know 7 existed. That's kind of high. Anyways, when we go and look at that, we'll have a couple comps here to look at. Last PSA 9, 8,700, and that's basically it. So, that was sort of the heyday of pre-modern 2021 into 2022, so I do think that was probably hyped prices. So I think being down 50% isn't terrible. This is a higher price than any PSA 8, I believe, has ever sold for. If we look here, 3,600 during August of 2021. So they haven't fallen out completely. I would say this is doing fairly well in high grade, especially probably compared to pre-boom. We don't have any pricing in here, but I would imagine, 2019 PSA 9 or 10 of this was probably $50 to a few $100. It wasn't anything all that crazy. The hobby goes on and narratives are created, and one thing that was pointed out in the Vintage Discord, again linked down below, was that the borders on this were fairly wide, and apparently there are sheet cut versions of this, so maybe that's the case here and why this was able to grade so well, and also with such big borders. If you compare generally, these are pretty thick left to right, and presumably could be cut again if someone wanted to, but yeah, what are you gonna do? Then we have the Jim Thorpe. So this one sold for $4,800. Of course, this is an Olympian from the U.S., so not all that related to soccer, but just was curious what this did. All-time high price was a PSA 8 that had sold for, I think, I mean, it's not loading here, but yeah, $13,000, excuse me, and then PSA 8 as well for $9,000. Way back in the day, pre-boom, as you can see here, 4.5 in 2019 was doing around about $1,000. Now a 5.5 does nearly $5,000, so up a good bit there. So, you know, gotta go and get your Jim Thorpes now before they moon even more. Fan favorite throughout soccer, of course. Love the USA badge, though. Really nice looking. And then finally, winning the week here, we do have a soccer player in Kylian Mbappe out of 99. Goes for $5,400. A green PSA 10 does what seems like a decent number, but of course, when we go and look, Mbappe's not going to be doing all that hot. So if we go back, it's not going to end. Each price just gets higher and higher. We start at $5,400, $66, $75, $96, $96, $11,000, $12,600, then $16,800, then finally it goes down back here, you know, anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 back in 2021. So this has kept going down and down and down, and now it's down maybe 75% from the absolute peak. I guess if we take a relative peak, you could say maybe 15K on all those average, so down 66% from the all-time high. But again, you know, it's always tricky because people see these cards keep going down and they're like, man, nothing in soccer is going up. I just feel like a lot of things are now having the reset that they might not have had before. Like some of the Pele's in low grades or some of the more common Pele's. To me, it always felt like they should have reset sooner just because, you know, they're high pop and everything's sort of resetting, so why aren't they? So when they come down, I'm not surprised, and sort of the same here. I mean, these Topps Chrome Mbappe's have been holding on really, really well. Like we talked about before, I mean, I looked at the sticker earlier. The sticker's absolutely plummeted. It's like, you know, 8 to 10% of the price that it was at the all-time peak. And the Mbappe Topps Chrome is 25% of what it was at the all-time peak. So comparatively, it's performing pretty well. But obviously, you know, in a larger picture, it's not doing all that great. So we don't end the auction on the most positive of notes. But I feel like generally, some things were doing good, some things were doing bad. And that's a decent spot to be in, I would say. We'll take a look at next week. I haven't given it a peek yet, so we'll see what we have going on there in terms of the highest prices. Oh my gosh, we have the gold Kaboom. I don't really look for these, so I haven't seen any of these really. But the gold text Kaboom, everyone's favorite. There we go. A layout there. We have a red Messi PSA 9. Seemingly not a crazy week if this is what we have topping off the list here. This is a lot of modern and on-card Messi. We have a 25 Joseph Pottinger there, already at $200. Scrolling down further, you know, you have a couple Kabooms, some odd and end Pele's, but honestly a really, really poor week generally. This is pretty cool Garrincha right there. A blue Pulsar, Modric, and not a whole lot in between. A pretty rough week, I would say. But we've had a lot of good ones lately, so, you know, we're probably due. But that's where we're going to end it for today. So hopefully you enjoyed. Again, if you did, make sure to leave a like. I'd appreciate it greatly. Anything you thought sold high, low, maybe something you snagged, would love to hear about it in a comment down below. And if you want to see more videos like this as soon as I go live, make sure to subscribe. But with that said, hopefully you have a wonderful day, and peace.